My name is Zara Evelyn, and the moment I realized my boss, Cornelius Thatcher, had been deliberately sabotaging my career to hide his theft, something inside me hardened into cold, calculated fury. It was 5 p.m. on a Friday when he dropped a thick manila folder onto my desk with that familiar smirk, informing me I had until Monday morning to complete what should have been a 3-month, comprehensive market analysis. The way his wife, Oilia, watched from the conference room, her predatory eyes locked on me through the glass wall, should have been my first warning, but I was too busy calculating the sheer impossibility of the task, too focused on the mathematical certainty of failure to understand that failure was exactly what they wanted. Cornelius had mastered the art of weaponizing deadlines, assign the impossible, watch the employee scramble and break, then use the inevitable collapse as legal justification for termination, clean and efficient. What I didn't yet know was that he'd done this to 7 other people over the past 2 years, each firing perfectly timed just after major client payments mysteriously disappeared from company accounts. Before I explain how I turned his own trap into his complete destruction, take a moment to tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place, because what I'm about to share changed everything I believed about justice, and you need to hear how desperation can be reshaped into the most beautiful revenge. Please like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell, because stories like this are rare, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. That Friday evening, sitting alone under the office building's harsh lighting, staring at requirements that would normally take an entire team months to complete, I felt the familiar weight of professional doom settle in as Cornelius's impossible assignments echoed in my mind, each one worse than the last, the pattern finally undeniable. Sudden project reassignments, vanished work, and deadlines designed to crush me. Yet something had shifted during those months of systematic pressure. Where panic once lived, there was now an unsettling clarity. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was finally seeing the game for what it was. But instead of diving headfirst into the impossible analysis, I started questioning everything. Why this project? Why now? And why Oilia, hired as HR director just 3 weeks earlier, was suddenly so obsessed with my performance metrics. I began my weekend not with spreadsheets, but with something far more dangerous: curiosity about the company's financial patterns. What I uncovered in those first hours would have made a forensic accountant weep with admiration, because Cornelius Thatcher was a craftsman of corporate theft, and I was about to become his greatest mistake. Large client payments would arrive, be deposited into the main account, then quietly transferred to a secondary account he controlled, followed by manufactured delays, blamed employees, and terminations timed to occur before anyone could trace the missing money. Those employees left believing they had simply failed, never realizing they'd been scapegoats for embezzlement. By Saturday morning, I had built a timeline. Jennifer Ashworth fired 6 months ago after the Morrison payment of $230,000 was transferred the day before her dismissal. Bradley Quinton terminated after the $185,000 Henderson payment vanished within 24 hours. 7 employees, 7 payments, 7 perfectly timed failures that allowed Cornelius to pocket nearly $2 million over 2 years. By Saturday evening, I understood with chilling certainty that I wasn't being set up to fail a market analysis. I was being positioned as scapegoat number 8 to cover the next incoming payment. That was the moment I made the decision that changed everything. Instead of attempting the impossible task, I would give Cornelius exactly what he asked for: a comprehensive analysis, just not the one he expected. Sunday became the most productive day of my professional life as I built something extraordinary. A presentation designed as the ultimate efficiency solution, one that traced every dollar, every convenient firing, every suspicious coincidence, exposing not only the stolen money, but a trail of wrongful termination lawsuits waiting to detonate. The brilliance of it was turning his own format against him. He had demanded a market analysis presentation for Monday morning's executive meeting, delivered in front of the entire C-suite and recorded for company archives, because he wanted witnesses to my failure. Instead, he was about to have witnesses to his ruin. Monday arrived with that sharp calm that always precedes a storm, and I walked into the building carrying my laptop bag, fully aware of the weight of what I was about to release. The conference room was already packed when I entered, the entire C-suite, multiple department heads, and seated at the head of the table like royalty, Cornelius and Oilia Thatcher. Oilia's presence finally clicked into place. She wasn't just his wife, she was his insurance policy, the HR director who could manipulate reviews, alter records, and ensure terminated employees left quietly without asking dangerous questions about timing or money. "Zara," Cornelius said with the theatrical concern he'd perfected, "I hope you've prepared something substantial. As you know, we have serious decisions to make about departmental efficiency." The threat barely concealed. "Present your failure, accept your termination, and let us continue uninterrupted." I connected my laptop to the main display and watched the title slide appear. "Maximizing Profit Margins Through Strategic Fraud Elimination, a Comprehensive Financial Analysis." The energy in the room shifted instantly. This wasn't the presentation they expected, and Cornelius's expression flickered between confusion and rising alarm. I thanked them for the opportunity and began, my voice calm and professional, explaining that over the weekend, I had conducted an exhaustive analysis of the company's financial efficiency, specifically identifying internal profit drains that had cost nearly $2 million over the past 24 months. The first slide revealed a timeline of major client payments aligned with employee terminations. Every data point meticulously documented with dates, amounts, and transfer records. And I watched the color drain from Cornelius's face as he realized that his insistence on a public, recorded presentation was becoming permanent evidence of his own destruction. Advancing to the next slide, I pointed out the striking correlation between large payments and sudden performance issues leading to termination, noting the statistical probability of such a pattern occurring naturally was approximately 0.003%. Oilia attempted to interrupt, rising with manufactured concern about presentation protocol, but CEO Harrison Blackthorne silenced her with a gesture, his attention locked on the screen as understanding dawned in his eyes. The following slide detailed the account transfers, complete with routing numbers, timestamps, and the secondary account Cornelius had so carefully concealed, the result of my Sunday spent tracing every transaction into an evidence chain prosecutors would savor. I explained that the elegance of the scheme lay in its psychological manipulation, employees conditioned to believe they'd failed professionally, when in reality they'd been selected as disposable scapegoats to justify termination and prevent discovery of embezzlement. Cornelius stopped trying to hide his panic, repeatedly glancing at the recording equipment, fully aware every word was being preserved for the legal proceedings to come. The room had fallen into total silence except for my voice, methodically dismantling 2 years of carefully engineered theft as I showed completed deliverables, backdated performance reviews altered by Oilia, and the systematic selection of employees immediately after major payments arrived. 7 employees, terminated under identical circumstances, each coinciding with vanished funds ranging from $120,000 to $315,000. CFO Patricia Wyndham was already scribbling furiously, calculating wrongful termination exposure, criminal liability, and reputational fallout, but I wasn't finished. The final section revealed something that chilled even me when I uncovered it. Cornelius had been preparing to scale up. My weekend assignment wasn't just about covering another theft. It was about positioning me as the scapegoat for his largest score yet, the Meridian Industries contract worth $4.7 million scheduled to pay out Tuesday morning. He had planned to blame the entire loss on my failure, terminate me Monday afternoon, and disappear with enough money to retire comfortably. Instead, he sat trapped in a room full of witnesses, watching his entire operation exposed using his own words, his own format, recorded for posterity. The psychological warfare he'd perfected now turned back on him with surgical precision. I ended with a final slide showing the truth. Financial impact. Not only the stolen funds, but the cost of replacing 7 talented employees, the looming lawsuits, the criminal charges, and the lasting damage to the company's reputation. My recommendation, I said, meeting Cornelius's eyes as his world collapsed in real time, is the immediate implementation of fraud prevention protocols, a full forensic accounting review, and direct coordination with law enforcement to recover stolen assets and prevent future theft. The silence that followed was exquisite. Harrison Blackthorne broke it first, his voice heavy with the realization that his company had been systematically looted right under his watch. "Cornelius," he said, "I need you and Oilia to remain here while we contact legal and our external auditors." What happened next, however, exceeded even my most ambitious expectations of how completely someone could destroy themselves through sheer arrogance. Instead of staying quiet or attempting damage control, Cornelius made the fatal choice to double down. "This is absurd," he sputtered, jabbing a trembling finger in my direction. "You're trusting someone who couldn't even finish a simple weekend assignment." Zara clearly fabricated these documents to cover her own incompetence. The executives exchanged razor-sharp glances. He was still trying to run his original playbook, even with the evidence of his crimes glowing behind him on the wall. "Actually," I replied calmly, lifting my phone, "everything I've presented came directly from your own computer files and company servers. I documented every access point, every timestamp, every source. Would you like me to walk through the exact folders where the evidence lived?" Oilia finally spoke, desperation sharpening her voice. "This presentation violates confidentiality protocols. Zara accessed sensitive financial data without authorization. Authorization that was explicitly granted when Cornelius assigned me to analyze company efficiency," I answered smoothly, adding that he'd insisted I use any resources necessary to complete the task. I then displayed the email chain where Cornelius himself authorized my access, practically demanding I dig as deep as possible to complete his impossible assignment. His own words now formed the legal foundation of my case, and the irony was not lost on anyone in the room. He had handed me the keys to uncover his crimes and then demanded I present them publicly. CFO Patricia Wyndham leaned forward, her expression hard. "Cornelius, I need immediate access to the secondary account referenced in this presentation." "I don't know what account she's talking about," he lied, his voice cracking. "Account number 841293657 at Hartwell Regional Bank," I recited from memory. "Opened 18 months ago using your social security number and personal identification. Current balance approximately $1.8 million as of Friday's transfers." The room erupted into controlled chaos as urgent calls went out to legal, forensic accountants, law enforcement, and the board. Everyone suddenly had somewhere to be, except Cornelius and Oilia, who sat frozen like specimens under glass. The most satisfying moment came when Patricia ended her call and looked directly at him. "The account has been frozen pending investigation. Bank security footage shows you making deposits that align exactly with the dates in Zara's presentation." That was when Cornelius finally grasped the full scope of his destruction. Not just the theft, but the conspiracy he'd built with his wife, the 7 careers he'd ruined, the millions in lawsuits ahead, and the criminal charges that would shadow him for life. Oilia made one last desperate attempt, claiming it was all a setup and that I'd been planning the attack for months with former employees. But I calmly opened another file and displayed emails between Cornelius and Oilia from before her official hire, outlining their plan to systematically remove senior staff and replace them with her relatives and friends. My termination, I explained, was meant to clear the way for Oilia's sister Genevieve to take my role, continuing a pattern repeated across departments. 7 terminated employees, I concluded. 7 new hires, all personally connected to Oilia. The nepotism alone warranted investigation, but combined with the embezzlement, it revealed a picture of comprehensive corporate fraud. Harrison Blackthorne stood up, his decision unmistakably final. Security, please escort Cornelius and Oilia to separate offices. They are not to communicate with each other or access any company systems. Legal will coordinate with law enforcement regarding the formal arrest process. As security moved in, something in Cornelius shifted, the frantic denial evaporating and giving way to a cold, focused rage aimed squarely at me. You think you're clever, don't you? You have no idea what you've done. There are consequences for interfering in business that doesn't concern you, Cornelius snapped, but Harrison cut in sharply, warning him to stop talking. Cornelius was already past reason. She's destroyed everything, he ranted. 2 years of careful planning, millions in secured funds, a perfect system that hurt nobody. Nobody. I stood then, my voice carrying 2 years of bottled fury. Jennifer Ashworth suffered a nervous breakdown after you fired her, I said. She believed she was incompetent, that she'd failed at everything. Bradley Quinton is still unemployed because you destroyed his professional reputation. 7 people absorbed the failure you manufactured, believing they weren't good enough, when their only mistake was standing in your way when you needed scapegoats. That truth struck him harder than any legal consequence ever could. For 2 years, he'd convinced himself his victims deserved what happened, that he was simply a superior strategist, outmaneuvering weaker players. Confronting the reality that he'd destroyed innocent lives for money was something he'd never allowed himself to face. As security escorted them out, Oilia shot me a look of pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, I replied evenly. It absolutely is. The conference room cleared, leaving only Harrison, Patricia, and me. Damage control, legal strategy, and a full audit awaited them. But before plunging into crisis mode, Harrison looked at me with an expression I'd never seen from senior leadership before. Respect, Zara. What you did today saved this company from total financial collapse. The Meridian payment alone would have bankrupted us once the fraud surfaced. Your weekend work prevented catastrophe. There's more, I said quietly. The secondary account wasn't Cornelius's only hiding place. I uncovered offshore accounts, shell companies, and a network that extended far beyond our organization. This was never going to stop at 7 employees or $2 million. Patricia's phone rang instantly, and she went pale when she saw the caller ID. Meridian Industries, she said. They're probably calling about the payment schedule. Answer it, Harrison replied grimly. We need to begin the disclosure process now. As Patricia explained the internal fraud on the call, I felt something fundamental shift in my professional identity. I was no longer an employee struggling to survive impossible deadlines and manufactured failure. I had become someone capable of dismantling complex criminal conspiracies with nothing but persistence and analysis. The aftermath unfolded with brutal efficiency. Law enforcement arrived within the hour, armed with the evidence I'd compiled, while forensic accountants flooded the systems, uncovering even more than I'd initially found. The 7 terminated employees were contacted and offered not just reinstatement, but compensation for the damage done to their careers. The most satisfying moment came 3 hours later when I received a text from Jennifer Ashworth. She'd been contacted about the investigation and called to thank me personally, her voice breaking as she admitted she'd spent months believing she was a failure, wondering what was wrong with her. You gave me back my confidence, my professional identity, she said. I don't know how to thank you. 7 similar calls followed over the next 2 days. 7 people learning that their failures had been engineered by criminals, not personal inadequacy. The legal process moved with rare speed, the evidence so thorough and meticulously documented that Cornelius's attorneys advised immediate plea negotiations instead of trial. The offshore accounts I uncovered escalated the case to federal charges. transforming a corporate embezzlement scandal into an international financial crime investigation. Oilia tried to plead ignorance, claiming she'd been manipulated by her husband, but the email trail exposed her as an equal partner in both planning and executing the fraud, and her attempts to replace terminated employees with family members proved clear premeditation and conspiracy. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching Cornelius Thatcher receive a 15-year sentence for financial crimes, conspiracy, and racketeering, while Oilia was sentenced to 12 years for her role. The stolen money was recovered and returned to the company, along with penalties that funded a major expansion, but the most meaningful change was personal. Harrison Blackthorne offered me Cornelius's former position as department head, with triple my previous salary and full autonomy, and the weekend meant to end my career, instead elevated me beyond anything I'd imagined. The 7 former employees received substantial settlements and new opportunities, either returning in senior roles or moving on stronger elsewhere. Jennifer Ashworth was promoted to senior analyst, Bradley Quinton became our new client relations director, and all of us learned the critical difference between genuine failure and manufactured destruction. Real challenges create growth and learning, while artificial failures designed to serve someone else's criminal agenda create only psychological harm and self-doubt. Looking back, Cornelius's greatest mistake wasn't just the embezzlement or the fraud, but believing intelligent, capable people would accept failure without questioning the conditions that produced it. He relied on desperation overriding analysis, on victims internalizing blame instead of examining patterns, and instead he encountered someone who responded to impossible deadlines, not with panic, but with curiosity. The assignment meant to professionally execute me became the foundation for exposing the most elaborate corporate fraud scheme in our state's history, and the presentation format meant for my humiliation became the instrument of his destruction. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't an elaborate plan, but refusing to accept injustice as inevitable and using clear thinking to understand why it exists. Today, I run the department Cornelius once controlled, installing systems that protect employees from the abuse he engineered. Every impossible deadline questioned, every sudden performance issue investigated, every termination reviewed. Most importantly, I've learned to trust that when something feels fundamentally wrong at work, investigation usually reveals why, and now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a workplace situation designed to make you fail? Did you investigate it or internalize the blame? And if this story revealed red flags you might have missed, like the video, share it, subscribe, and ring the notification bell because more stories are coming about turning professional disasters into unexpected victories, and you won't want to miss what happens when people choose to fight back against systematic injustice instead of accepting it.